I am Bentley, and I'm on the developer experience team at Atlassian, and I'm joined. I'll let my partners introduce themselves. Ian.
Yes, Ian Buchanan. I've been here for 6.5 years or so in various advocacy and evangelism roles. And so I've seen a lot of what happens inside and outside of our APIs. I'm looking forward to talking more about those as we go.
Guy.
Hi, my name is Guilherme. You can call me Guy if you want. I am a developer support engineer, and I just started at Atlassian. It's been like less than a month, but I am learning about OAuth, and I'll be glad also to be talking about this.
Cool. So we are going to dive into conversation about authentication. To set the context and preface this correctly, I know just enough to be what some would probably say very dangerous. And I have invited Ian and Guy here to help me become a better developer on Atlassian, particularly when it comes to managing authentication and being responsible. So with that, we're going to, the topic of conversation today is authentication. So I understand that we have a couple different types of authentication, and what I want to focus on is cloud, but maybe Ian, you can give us just like the TLDR for server and data center, because I know that there are authentication methods and authentication flows for those.
Yeah, see, the thing is that I think people get hung up on resemblance, and to be clear, like these were the same products once, but that's like 5 years ago in our past, and they have diverged considerably to the point where now when Jira Server and Data Center say API tokens doesn't mean the same thing as the cloud approach, although when you use it with basic auth, that probably works pretty easily to switch. There's also a very old OAuth 10A available for Jira and Confluence that is both cloud and server. But I really just want to try to persuade people, don't treat these as if you can bridge across easily. These are two separate and diverging products, server and cloud, and you will suffer if you try to make them work the same. We have definitely had some very big integrations that have tried, and it's just like all that happens is developers suffering and customers can't get much value out of the integration. So
okay, so even I'm coming at this as like a totally fresh person wanting just to build in cloud. But so even if I were well established with server, data center, building P2 plugins, like I should still heed your advice and treat auth on cloud as a totally different beast.
That's my take on it. If there's coincidental like overlap today, just we might break it tomorrow. So like start believing in the two product idea today. Yeah.
Okay. So that's where we got our server data center caveat out of the way. Diving into cloud. I guess my question is, how do I begin to figure out which of the authentication methods that we offer should I start with? Like, what is the golden path where I have a vague sense of what like I want my new app that I'm building to do? I'm building primarily for Jira and Confluence. Where do I start reading? And maybe I guess that's probably a secondary question is, can I attack Jira and Confluence in the same way? And if not, when do I need to start like diverging my thinking on those two products?
Yeah, okay. Unlike the server cloud difference, Jira and Confluence in cloud share an incredible amount of like service infrastructure, and therefore you can treat them the same. I think for all practical purposes,
okay.
That's yeah, you can. But the bigger question about like what auth what do I need to know about auth is it kind of reminds me of this tweet I saw once about how I want to log in is not a user story. It's like a lot of projects start this way because you must log in, or in APIs, you must auth before you can start making all of these calls. But and so unfortunately, it is a considerable amount of effort in the Atlassian world to figure this out. But my recommendation is to really think in terms of what you were saying, which is I know what I want to do, and that's going to define what options are available to you. The ideal path would be that you can walk from starting out just kind of poking some APIs with your API tokens as yourself. It's the easiest way to get started. The intent of the end of where those API tokens go is when it stops being you. Like, so if you want to distribute this to someone else, like as an app, we kind of use the term app at Atlassian pretty openly. Like anything that talks to Atlassian products is going to be an app. Well, if any time you want somebody else to use this, it's not just a script on your laptop anymore. That's when you should step up into OAuth. For us, the OAuth 2, also known as 3LO, is so in OAuth terms, this is known as the authorization code flow, because there are 3 parties involved. There's you, your app, and there's Atlassian, your app, and a user saying, yes, I want it to act on my behalf. There are some other OAuth things floating around in the Atlassian ecosystem. This can get pretty confusing. Bitbucket World, for example, implements all of the authorization flows in OAuth. And so it is also 2LO and some others, some magic one for very special get you reasons. And so kind of similar to Bitbucket, if you look around at some of the other products, you may also find some different OAuths. But the one for Jira and Confluence is special. It is behind an API gateway that we run. That's why it's shared for Jira and Confluence. And I expect this API gateway to become a common feature across our product. So in time, I hope the features of the API gateway fill out, but also that it becomes the common thing for all of them. And then the auth question becomes common to every product. But
okay,
yeah.
Can we start with I am writing a script for myself. Let's say I want to move some Jira issues around. I have to create a Confluence weekly wrap-up page every Thursday. I want to automate these things. I'm not yet building an app for distribution with other people. What is the auth mechanism that I should be using there?
Yeah, get an API token from your user profile.
Okay.
And then use HTTP basic auth, which is a header. It's kind of header. And most of the tools. Here's a thing that's a little bit confusing in our docs is we oddly overspecify how to do basic auth. So a lot of people have been confused. They get their token, and we say you must encode the token a certain way and do these other things. Yeah, but all the libraries take care of that if you say, I want to do basic auth.
Okay.
Curl and everything. So you don't have to do all this stuff by hand that we do say in the docs. That's effectively like using a password in, if you were using basic auth. So use that API token.
Okay.
That's the simplest way.
That really, really clean. That's easy. I can't even screw that up. Okay, so moving on to app distribution, where I want to build an app that I want the 2 of you to use. We have OAuth 2.0 implementations that are behind this API gateway. There are tons of libraries out there for doing OAuth 2. Should I use one of those to hand off and not roll my own OAuth 2 implementation?
Yeah, no one should be rolling their own.
Okay.
But unfortunately, there's a piece of the flow that we do, that isn't entirely standard. It's kind of nitpicky, but the fundamental truth is that the very start of the flow is you need to generate a URL to provide to users so they can go and do the grant. They can click the button that says, yes, I authorize this app to be able to do things. Constructing that URL, we have a couple parameters in there, one of which is the audience equals api.atlassian.net that is required, but not part of the spec or not part of that spec, the authorization code flow, which means most libraries don't know how to deal with it. So that you must construct, find a way to either with, kind of add something to your library or add it after the end or construct the URL on your own. It's not that hard, and many folks, I think we've got thousands of API clients now doing this flow. So it's definitely something you can figure out, but you may get hung up if you're using a standard library in that very first step. Otherwise, do use the library because every other part of it is standard.
Okay. Do we? I'm gonna ask a dangerous question. Do we have what you just said documented somewhere, even if it is the developer community?
No. Well, it's even in developer.atlassian.com. So
Okay,
cool.
In
the docs that tell you how to do the 3LO, what we don't really call out is, hey, this part is non-standard.
Okay.
But it is the very first piece, and then it describes what parameters you must have.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so here's kind of how things end up happening for a lot of people is they go into Postman, they try to do an OAuth 2, and it fails for them. And then they read the docs harder and usually kind of catch, okay, we didn't say you can't use a standard library to generate it, but that's kind of what people end up finding.
Okay, cool. I will try to link to those documentation somewhere, whatever YouTube allows us to link to. However YouTube links work. Yeah. Like eventually we'll point at the right one. Okay, so this brings up an interesting question, which is what is an app? Not what is an app, but what are the permissions around an app and authentication? I assume, can I just send the two of you a URL and you can start smashing like allow, or is there some other step where the app actually has to be installed in my instance or namespace or what have you?
Yeah. Well, that's pretty good for being dangerous. But that's right. There are a few things here. There's kind of layers to this. One is when you start building an OAuth app, it is effectively limited to you the same way your API token is limited to you. And so that's for safety as you're building up your, whatever it is, no one else can authorize to make that happen. Now, eventually you hit a point where you do want to share it and you want other people to be able to authorize the same app to do that. And our 3LO docs describe how to do this. Unfortunately, I am finding on the community that a lot of people are getting confused here because they don't separate the fact that I can share something around to just you, Bentley, or share it through Marketplace to the whole world. And there are a lot of people who don't want the Marketplace side. They just want to do the sharing within their own company.
Yeah.
The point in our docs where you reach that, they don't quite draw enough distinction, but it's the same thing. You must enable something in your app, in your OAuth 2 app called sharing, and then that allows you to authorize my app to do things.
Okay, and do I need to do something like in my, is there some sort of instance? Am I using the right word? I don't know that I'm using, like I know I have an Atlassian.net URL. Do I need to do something to allow your app into that aside from me just hitting like accept?
No.
I don't, okay.
Just hit accept. So that's very much, okay, in line with 3LO. If it were 4LO, maybe there's an admin also involved But no, in this case, it's you. And if I remember the features right, the admins do have a way to see who has brought these kinds of apps in, and maybe can
Okay.
do some things to block them later, but they are not, there's no install step. This is a
Okay.
little bit different than some of the other app models that we have, but OAuth is quite simple in that way.
Cool. Okay, this is actually aligning very nicely with what Trello has, which I am familiar with, which is Trello, similar thing. Okay, cool. Okay, so I guess kind of my next question is, we've talked about having that private token that's just mine. We've talked about how to now use OAuth 2 to do something that's a little bit more distributed.
Okay, so I would say one thing that you have to learn in that leap there is about scopes, because that's part of some of this layering here is that, okay, there is this sharing thing that I do, but then there is also saying my app needs to do these things. And so when you're going from an API token, which can do everything you can, into the world of apps, starting to learn this set of scopes and what APIs go with which scopes, or even for some APIs, it like you can hit the endpoint, but you can't do the thing unless the right scope is there. Some scopes don't even apply particularly to products. So there's like a read :me that is about getting a user profile, and another one about refreshing tokens. So all of those scopes are something that you have to learn as you move up that chain from the API token into OAuth, is suddenly you have to learn about scopes.
And yeah, I guess this kind of leads to a question that I have, which is, with that private token, am I hitting the same API endpoints as I am with OAuth 2, or are they two separate endpoints? Because you keep saying private, and so it sounds very much like I'm kind of pretending to be maybe like a first party client with that private token. And then the OAuth 2, it sounds like there's another section that I'm actually reaching out to make requests to.
Yeah, and people are getting hung up on this because we don't cover it like in all the places in our docs. So the API token is quite straightforward. You're right. You use the URL paths as they're described in the REST API documentation, which is your base URL, the one you usually go to in the UI, plus REST API paths, and then you give it the token, and it's good to go. The consequence of putting OAuth 2 on the API gateway is that you must call through the API gateway, which is a different URL pattern. And the pattern more or less encodes like, it's going to be Jira plus, well, first there's the common api.atlassian.net. And then there's some path stuff, and some of the path will indicate whether it's a Jira or Confluence API you're trying to get to. And then something called a Cloud ID. This is a unique UUID that UUID is what it is now. So maybe it won't be that forever, but it's some unique string that identifies your cloud site without being a URL. So
okay,
this, you need to go call some other endpoint in order to dereference a URL into the Cloud ID, but then that becomes part of the path, and away you go. Now you're putting, then you put the path, the rest of the REST API path on the end of that. And if you get that wrong, like if you send an OAuth token to the base URL way, you'll start to get some weird errors. Most of the time it tells you like unauthenticated, and that, but then even in there are sometimes some weird errors that aren't 401s, and they're wrong. Hopefully we fix it so they're always that, but in case, you got to kind of like look for these signals of wait, this isn't what I expected, maybe I'm using the wrong URL. So, and in OAuth 2, you use the right URL and that token, and yeah, everything will work out fine.
Is it a safe rule of thumb to say api.atlassian.com, I should be using the OAuth 2 flow? everything else, I should be using token or the private token, the user token.
Yeah.
Okay. Almost.
Yeah, we haven't talked about the third category.
Yeah. Okay. I know that I know JWTs are a thing. JWTs. Okay. I feel like we've expanded OAuth 2 and private tokens fairly well. Am I missing a topic that? Is there anything else I should know about those two before we move on to JWTs?
Well, one of the things that does gate, I'll say two things. One of the things that does gate your choice of OAuth 2 is that, yeah, but not all of the APIs are under the API gateway quite yet. Notably, like called out in the docs, for example, is the Jira Software API that covers things like epics and boards and sprints. And so they're very software specific ideas. Common concepts like Jira projects and workflows and issues and custom fields are in the platform API, which is under OAuth 2, but these software specific concepts are not yet there. You know, give us a little bit of time, we'll get there. We know there are some ones that we have to put under the OAuth 2. This, unfortunately, I wish there were just a simple way, like a list that you could just look at and say like, oh man, I better avoid this API yet. I'm not ready now to suffer these limitations. But for now, I think you gotta start hitting APIs with tokens, and you know, if that doesn't work out, I don't know, ask for help in the community. So that's
yeah. Let me ask you then this: are those things like the Jira Software APIs that aren't a part of OAuth 2 yet? Are those documented? Like, could I find one of those and be like, oh, I want to use it? Like, can I find the epics endpoint documented somewhere and just not realize that it's actually not available in OAuth 2? It's documented because ostensibly it's available to those private tokens, and you can use it for that. It's not available in OAuth 2 yet.
Right, and unfortunately, none of the docs seem to do a good job representing, for example, that URL switch that I described, and they're not very prominent. Like if it's missing from OAuth 2, you won't know it. There's no signal to say like not under OAuth 2. So the Jira Software API doesn't reflect anything about OAuth 2. Well, it's not under there yet.
Okay.
Over in the Jira platform one, it does say like OAuth 2 and then what scope it needs. So that's sort of the clue of like, yeah, it'll be there. But
okay. Let me ask a question that I know the answer to, but I just want to clarify before we move on to JWTs, because I don't know how they exist in the Atlassian ecosystem at all. Forge notably doesn't require that you do any sort of authentication flow, meaning you as the developer don't have to do anything. It allows you to make calls. I think it was a product call. What's the method name? I can't remember. As user. I assume that under the hood, those are using that existing OAuth 2 gateway. Is that the case?
Yeah, that is correct. And that's why it's pretty like good path now. When we get to JWT, we'll kind of explain the 2020 hindsight we had on it, but go from basic tokens to OAuth, and then from OAuth to Forge pretty naturally. Yes, you'll take out some code that was, like that you were manually catching these, auth flow things about, but if it works for OAuth 2 in your script-like code, then it will also work in a Forge app. Also. Okay,
so it is fairly safe to say it's July 12th, 2021, since we're recording a video, that the Forge, what you're able to do with product APIs in Forge is pretty tightly coupled with what you're able to do with OAuth 2.0.
Yes, exactly coupled. Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, then this actually brings up a good question I had that I wanted to ask before we moved on. We've been talking, or we haven't been talking. My assumption has been that we've been talking about using OAuth 2.0, and you're making requests on behalf of the user. So like in Trello, that's all you can do. It always shows up regardless of, it always shows up as like Ian moved the card over. There's no way to say Bentley's app moved the card over. Is there a way to do application, like act as an application in products? Or is it always as you're always taking action as a user?
Okay, well, we spoiled this one by pointing out there are methods for Acta's product with
Forge.
Forge. And
okay.
Forge does that because when you install a Forge app, it also creates what is kind of commonly known in the industry as a system user. So there's a user associated with that app that will act, that you know, like will be represented in the UI as like, yeah, this person created the, you know, this person that's really an app, it created this, you know, created this issue or something like that. That's that there is some special kind of magic going on there with how much the app is taken care of for you by installing a user at its, you know, at install time. With a normal OAuth 2 app, you can't do that very easily.
Okay.
There is, however, a separate implementation of OAuth for some endpoints. We've been talking about them as connected DevOps and now more recently open DevOps, kind of rebranding with the user side of it. Those use a very special implementation of OAuth that is 2LO.
Okay.
And 2LO flows means act as system. So that means Jenkins sends in build reports as Jenkins.
Right.
But those cover only like commits, builds, deploys, feature flags. And I say commits, it's like commits, branches, all the dev info related stuff.
Okay.
So that's a very small and narrow point. It is not under the gateway. So all of the things that I said, well, no, sorry, I take that back. It is under the gateway, but it's a different. It's not the 3LO.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. We'll let that be. But I think with more knowledge comes more responsibility. Okay. Moving on to JWTs. I know that we have supports for JWTs of some sort. When do I need to use a JWT and why would I use a JWT?
Yeah, that's a pretty narrow context. It's kind of a jump because the implementation of JWT, so JWT is an industry standard, but the claims that you put in it, or the claims that we require in the ones that authenticate with within our context, have one special one called a query string hash, which is for checking and making sure that
QSH.
QSH.
Okay.
Checking and making sure that people didn't tamper with URLs. This is especially important because the context in which we use them is inside Connect apps, and they were invented for the use inside of iframes, where technically people can open up developer tools in their browser and start to make changes on the page and the code that is getting sent around. We needed an anti-tampering mechanism in this iframe context. Okay, so that's what's magical about it, is this QSH, a kind of non-stand. Well, we've documented the spec pretty well. That, you know, there's a way to get that claim. It's pretty non-trivial to create that claim, though, if all you were doing before was basic tokens and then you jump in here. So what most people do in this situation is just use one of our off-the-shelf app frameworks, Atlassian Connect Express or Atlassian Connect Spring Boot. And these take care of that level too, in a very similar way that Forge sort of hides that stuff from you. This will take care of all of that. So that's what kind of gets us, when to use a JWT? The simple answer is when you're building a Connect app, and hopefully you don't have to see it. Like hopefully the framework takes care of it for you.
Okay. So JWTs, if you're in Connect, and preferably use one of those frameworks, is is Atlassian Connect Express? Is it called that because it is JavaScript and it's Express under the hood?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
I thought we just named it that, like to like indicate that it is a fast way to build Atlassian Connect. But then when you said Spring Boot, I was like, wait, that one's Java. It's named that because it's Java. I was like,
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought I had that same confusion when I started though, but when I was looking at this, like I think Express wasn't even as clearly popular as it is today. Like
Right. Okay. Atlassian Connect fast. Atlassian Connect quickly. Okay, so JOTs for Connect. I think that's really clean. I feel like I have a good understanding of my truth table. What else am I missing? Can I say back to you what I like, what the mental model that I've built?
Let's hear it.
Has Bentley been listening? If I'm doing local scripts, do basic auth, use that private token, those will not be hitting the api.atlassian.com. I can kind of go wild with that so long as I'm using it for my own personal use. It probably has access to some stuff that isn't available via OAuth 2. At the point in time that I am ready to build an app that I want to distribute to multiple people, whether it's via the marketplace or it's just because I'm building internally for my own company, I go OAuth 2. I'm going to use the API gateway. There are some caveats, and what I need to do, it's not just super vanilla OAuth, or I need to make sure I read the docs a little bit specifically. It is hard sometimes to determine whether an endpoint is OAuth 2 or private, and I might have to do a little bit of playing around. Forge, I cannot worry about it. Forge just takes care of it under the hood for me. It being making requests to Atlassian's APIs. And if I'm in Connect, preferably I use AC or Atlassian Connect Express or the Bootspring one, and it handles the JWT creation for me, because we do it. That is in there as anti-tampering mechanism, because we are dealing with iframes making cross-domain requests, and ideally those frameworks take care of it for me because we do some specific stuff with the query string hash. Is that mostly right?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. All right. So what are the other like takeaways where it's like, what are the other pieces of reference I should keep in mind and go read at some point in the future? Or what are the things that like Ian's top 3? You won't believe these authentication hacks.
So I think there's been some recent discussion on community about when to use which, and somebody was asking, in fact, in terms of API tokens and OAuth 2, and my answer was actually like, I think for anybody building an app, we like we said today, I'd really prefer that everybody go to OAuth 2 or get into the kind of the full-on Forge or Connect app, but there are limits, and so I kind of turn this around and like, that's the ideal categorization that you gave, Bentley, but the reality is that sometimes people have to vary for whatever reason, but let us know those reasons, because we kind of need to fix up our API coverage and whatever bugs there are in OAuth 2, we need to get them fixed so that what we described today is is both ideal and reality. And
okay.
That's kind of my flipping around is, I don't have any hacks, but it's
I guess then my a follow question is like, if there are certainly some intrepid developers out there that want to do something that is to be distributed, so more than just a personal app, that they're doing things, or they want to be doing things that aren't in OAuth 2, are there mechanisms through which they create some sort of flow or experience where you can use a token personal token. Like my thinking is, I could imagine, I've seen this in Trello kind of before. If you don't know how to kick someone through the authentication flow in Trello, a lot of times what you'll see people do is say, hey, go click this link and go click this link, and they walk the user through generating a personal token. Then they'll ask that user to copy and paste that personal token back into their app. And then that token gets used. In Trello's case, it's still OAuth 2.0. It's all the same type of token. Will people do this? Will developers do the same thing on our other products to get around the OAuth 2 limitations?
Well, OAuth 2 and sometimes Connect even, and sometimes just for their own reasons. Like if you start building an app and you get this thing working with an API token, sometimes you don't want to rewrite, or you don't have time to rewrite.
Yeah.
To use the other way. But these are all problems because for one, we do not, like, if you want to be in the marketplace. So let's, like, I know there are cases where we said, like, for, personal apps or just sharing within the company where you won't care, but marketplace really does not want apps collecting credentials. That's a real security no-no. And but that does apply throughout. Like it's not like, so you can get rejected from marketplace for doing that. We can also, like, our security folks may also get upset with you as an app if you do this. So no, we don't have good patterns for that, Bentley. There's not
well, I guess the pattern is don't do that. Like that.
The pattern is don't do that, but that doesn't mean that, like,
you can't.
It doesn't mean
like
you can't, and it doesn't mean there aren't cases where sometimes you like you're gonna have to, like. So again, that's where the feedback comes. I circle back to saying that again. Just please tell us. We need to know. You'd be surprised. I think people outside of Atlassian just figure we all know where all the places are. No, we don't. So tell us.
I have but 10 fingers.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I know 10 places, but I'll run out then. Like, that's it.
Cool. Okay. Well, I feel like this. I don't know what my record time is, but it's got to be close to 30 minutes. I feel like this has been a good overview of Auth. So thank you. This was very. I feel like I've learned something.
Good. Excellent.
Yeah.